So I'm talking today with co-founder of Plant and Farm and the Roots Regeneration program, Clare Hill. I'm going to be talking a bit about her background, her involvement with Regen Ag, and the broader implications for that work, and then what she's up to these days. Hello, Claire.
Hello, nice to see you.
And to you, yes. So I would like to start by just hearing a bit about your background. I've got to know you a bit. I know what you're up to these days, but don't know much about what brought you to this point.
Yeah, so I have had a kind of traditional UK agriculture background, I guess. I didn't grow, starting back even further. I didn't grow up very involved with farming, although my dad was a farm manager. We didn't, for the bulk of my growing up, we didn't live on the farm he was managing. And so it was like there in the background. And my mum's farm secretary for a number of farms. So agriculture was in the background, but it wasn't kind of like a key part of my life. But actually, on my mum's side of the family, there is a long lineage of farmers there over in South Lincolnshire on the Fens, actually. Um, and so I actually went to study an environmental management course at Bishop Burton after I left school. And it was there that when we studied the agriculture module that I was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is the bit I really love. Went to Australia for a year, went to Harper Adams, came out and had a kind of food industry and farming career. So worked at Red Tractor, National Farmers Union, Sainsbury's in the agriculture team, and at Dalesford, and then at FAI Farms, food business consultancy, kind of supporting on sustainability and animal welfare, supporting big food businesses. And then while I was at Sainsbury's, actually, I kind of definitely missed the sort of getting my hands dirty side of things, because in the early days I'd done lots of kind of practical farm jobs, and I missed that. And so we got some sheep in 2012 and started grazing. We had no land, and so we just grazed lots of other farmers' lands where we were living in Oxford at the time. And then as part of that, my husband's background is in catering. So we started up a catering van, actually. And so we were breeding, rearing, growing the lambs, and then using the meat for the catering van. And that was great fun. I know, like a total food to fork experience, farm to fork experience. Sorry, yeah, that's what we're doing there. Yeah.
Great. So, I mean, it seems to go all the way through, doesn't it? You've been in lots of different levels within this whole big thing of agriculture and food. Hey, so starting off on the land with your parents a little bit, but then the education, and then a mixture of corporate and entrepreneurship. I think that's a great combination of experiences there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So then what brought you to Regen Ag? How did you find that?
Yeah, so I guess there was not one moment. There was a kind of series of key moments, I think, when I think back. And the big one, there'd been a few points leading up where I've been running the farm for FAI, and we'd had our own sheep, and you're definitely kind of questioning things. So it was like it was the year of beast from the east. We had beast from the east. It was freezing cold, and all the water on site froze. So handballing water into chicken sheds and everything else was really hard work. And then we went into like the wettest lambing, that felt that it had ever been possible, and it was just this kind of, God, does it ever get better? Like, this is so hard all of the time. And definitely started to like question, like, why is it so hard? Surely we're doing the most fundamental thing on earth, which is growing food. How is this so hard? And so I'd had a few moments like that. And then I was basically heavily pregnant. I think almost on due, just before my due date, with my second child. And I happened to be asked to be involved in a training course that Caroline was doing. It was a 3-day, on regenerative agriculture and its background and what it was. And of course, I'd heard a couple of words about it. I'd rudely told everybody that had suggested it that it would never work with us. And, that wasn't what our farming system was like. It was coming out of America. I'd actually emailed back the guy that has done Carbon Cowboys and a couple of other films, and told him that it'll never work over here, so sort of there's no point in us talking type thing. And then I went on this thing with Caroline for 3 days, and I think possibly because I was so close to giving birth, like my hormones were everywhere. I just sat there and I just was on a chair like, oh wow, okay, maybe I was more open to it. I was feeling maybe more, I was less thinking about the day-to-day of work, and I was starting to wind down really for thinking about giving birth. And I just was totally open to it. And I just went through this. She described all the things that we did, but in a different way. So, a thistle, we see it as something bad to get rid of, but actually it's an indicator of soil health. And then, of course, I think, oh, yeah, actually, we get the worst thistles in the places where we see the most compaction, as an example. And I was like, oh, crikey. So it's just this like 3 days of sitting in that room of just total unraveling, really. And that's where yeah, that's where it started for me, when I really had my eyes open to a different way of thinking.
That's you're talking about Caroline Grindrod, who you're co-founding the Regeneration program. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute.
Yes,
Okay,
that's right.
so then you started to take on board Regen Ag and started to apply it at FAI, wasn't it, where you were at the time? Yeah. Okay. So, and you said there were some difficulties with that. Can you explain those to us?
Yeah, I guess so. We actually, the reason we got into Regen Ag, we did the thing with Caroline, and we thought actually this is relevant, for the world, and how do we bring that about? So we approached McDonald's UK, one of the FAI's biggest clients, because a lot of they obviously have strong connections in the States, and therefore there's a lot of Regen Ag chat was ahead of time in the States with the likes of Gabe Brown and White Oak Pastures and all the work they were doing. So we proposed that we did a project that ask the research question. And we focused in on one area, so we didn't do Regen Ag as a whole. We did grazing, because McDonald's are most interested in beef, I guess. Or it's difficult to do the whole piece in one go. So does adaptive multi-paddock grazing work in the UK? That was the research question. We didn't even know if it would work. But of course, it's difficult to change one part. You can't just change the grazing. You end up changing quite a lot. But that was the question we asked, and so then that it was a 4-year study, and that's how we got started, how I got started. And part of that was then we brought Caroline in as the kind of regen coach and trainer, to train us in how to do AMP grazing and deal with the understanding the different decisions that we would need to make around it, and train us basically as a farm team how to do AMP grazing, how to do Regen Ag, and so that's how we did it. So we went through different stages of grazing planning, of understanding weed species and what they meant, and I guess what she also did, as well as sharing the information and soil health and things, also was there's the coaching side. So like, we've left this field grass to grow really long, but now it's full of weeds. What do we do? The neighbours are complaining. The landlord's written us a letter to say that we're in breach of our tenancy because we're not keeping the land in good agricultural order, but actually, from our way of seeing it, we're doing more to protect soil health than we've ever done before. So surely they should see this as a good thing. Like, how do we deal with that? Do we just react and go around and top everything, or how should we do it? So there was like the practical information, and then the coaching element was it. But that was one example of where it was hard, but also just kind of someone badged it to me as this term OPP, like other people's panic. As soon as things start to change or look different, it seems to trigger off this panic station. And of course, that was going off in me, like thinking, oh, crikey, this looks different. But I'm trying to remain calm, because I know that if I think back to, why we're doing it, it's the right thing to do, because we want to see a more resilient farming system. We want to be less stressed. We want to try and deal with like the wormer resistance that we've got in the sheep and things like that. It's the right thing to do. But in that moment, when people are kind of, oh, this is messy. Oof, you let this place go a little bit. Oh, you don't want to do that. It's really hard to stay strong. And it seems to challenge. It's almost like it challenge people seem to challenge people. I think it challenged me, but then it seemed to, it almost offended people when you started to make change, because when you do it differently and say, no, we're not going to top that, as an example, then you're almost offending them because they would top it. And so then you sort of find yourself in these weird confrontational conversations, where it's not only that people aren't sort of going, oh, well, that's what she wants to do, and rolling her eyes, like they're actually upset and annoyed by what you're doing. And that was something that I didn't expect. But yeah, that was one of the things that happened through this change, because in some cases it is often almost the opposite, that we instead of seaweeds intervene, it's seaweeds stand back, see what happens, try and work out what's happening. It's like the opposite. So that's quite hard for us as humans, I think, to deal with.
So totally different way of thinking compared to what the decades of training that these folks that you've been talking to had to that point. And so they took it, they couldn't compute. This is right on the leading edge, Regen Ag, right? So it takes a different mindset. So having then started to adopt that mindset at work, how did that start to influence you outside of work, the rest of your life?
Yeah, so it came, it sort of came as a package. You sort of think, oh, it's just something it's just something I do. Well, I just do Regen Ag at work. And it's not that I do Regen Ag in my whole life, but the questions that it started to raise. And I think that started with that almost with having children, and the process of I guess the medicalized nature by which women give birth in the Western world. So it's of course fantastic to have the medical support that we do, but we seem to have taken away a lot of the instinct and naturalness out of it. To the point where everything is a kind of a medical decision. And so after having that session with Caroline, I was then hospitalized for a week because the baby was in the wrong position. And they were worried that there would be a problem being in the wrong position. And I said, well, also he might just go in the right position. Like that is also it. They wanted, of course, to do a cesarean, and I was like, oh, that feels like a really rushed response. But it was like a control. Well, if we get the baby out, we know it's okay, which can be the right thing. But actually, I was like, well, also there is he could just go in the right position and give birth naturally, and that would actually be a better start for us all. So I stayed in hospital for 7 days and 7 nights, and sort of every couple of hours, someone would come in and call me the troublemaker or being difficult. And but I was like, there is another option. We could just wait and see what happens. And we did. And I was discharged and it was fine. And I had a natural birth. And but it was like the approach that was taken, like this control mechanistic approach. I saw so many parallels in the way that we'd ended up doing food and farming, that I started to like see things coming out. So everything was kind of, there's a central place that tells you almost what to grow, how to grow it, what to apply, how to cultivate it, what machines to use. Very technical and step-by-step process. There's not a kind of like how a more natural process might work. And actually, so what we ended up doing is finding ourselves fighting natural processes all the time. So that's one area where the two parallels just really became clear. Yeah, sort of started to become clear to me.
Yeah, and this new mindset was sort of evolving and bleeding into other domains, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then what has this all brought you to now? And we've talked a little bit about, well, we've mentioned the Roots to Regeneration program. So, and obviously you are co-founder and running Plant and Farm as well. So how are you working with Regen Ag now? What is this process you've been through over the last, how many years has it been now?
It's 5 years.
5 years since the introduction to Regen Ag. So what has that culminated in now for you?
Yeah, so it's been a lot of time of change, because I guess I've been unpicking all of my own belief systems. I guess my worldview has changed, and now I see things differently. So then when you see things differently, I felt like I couldn't go back I couldn't just say, oh, I've seen that, but I'm just going to carry on doing it. I was like, no, I need to do it differently now, because I've seen this new way, and I think it will be better for me, for the planet, for my children. And so what that's led to is the co-founding of Plant and Farm in Shropshire, where we've taken on a livestock farm with the idea to kind of show the art of what's possible. There's loads of people trying things out with Regen Ag, picking up a couple of practices, trying things out, but there isn't the kind of imagining of what a truly advanced a farm at an advanced stage of regeneration, what would that look like? And I think we have this changing baseline or shifting baseline syndrome, where we don't even remember maybe the biodiversity or things that we were seeing 10 years ago, certainly not going back 200 years. Like we think the landscape we see now is beautiful and wonderful, but the data shows us that we're one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. But when you talk about that, when you're stood in the middle of a green field in Shropshire, you can't possibly imagine that. So I think that we've lost the vision of what it would look like. So that's what we're trying to do with the art of what's possible, and particularly with a focus on livestock farming, because the 50%-ish of UK agricultural land is under permanent pasture, so it's been managed with livestock in some way. And it seems that a lot of the narratives, or the Groundswell and Farm Ed and the other kind of really well-known places to go and learn about Regen Ag, of course they cover the whole spectrum, but they are arable focused originally. They're coming from a bare arable land, and how do you integrate livestock? Well, if you're already a livestock farm, you don't need to integrate any more livestock. You need to learn how to regenerate, turn that into a system that is regenerating. And so that's what we're focused on here. But and with Roots to Regeneration as a kind of build on that, so we want to do walk the walk on the farm ourselves, but also sharing the experience of change. So it's not just the facts of this is how many chickens and how many this and how many that, and this is how we did it, but actually this is the This is what it took to change. These were the criticisms we had. These were the wobbly moments where we doubted ourselves. These are the things that we got wrong, and these are the difficult conversations we've had to have, and sharing that part of it, because ultimately that's the kind of unlocker. We've got the data. You know, if we all listen to data, we wouldn't be where we are now. Climate scientists have been presenting data to us all for a long time, and there hasn't been action, as just one example where data alone is not enough to change particularly deep-rooted cultural beliefs and behaviors that we kind of have in the way that we do food farming at the moment.
Okay, excellent. Quite the adventure you've been on.
Yeah, yeah, it's been definitely we ripped up the rule book. I guess COVID was part of that as well. Like, my husband and I as a family had always thought we would move further west. I don't know why, we really like West Wales as a place we go on holiday every year, and sort of had dreams like many do of, oh, this is where we'll retire one day. And then COVID happened, and it was like, life's too short. So that was also part of it. Like, maybe 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 we want to do things a bit differently. And so a few things happened at work, and it was like, I don't know. And the opportunity, I think really deep down in me was this wanting to do more. Once I discovered regen, it wasn't enough to just do grazing. I think that was it. You know, grazing is one element of it. It's like, but what about everything else? What about agroforestry? What about other enterprises? How do we really rebuild resilience? And grazing is one part of that, but it's not the whole suite. And I felt like that was a really important contribution that I felt like I needed to make to the movement and the story. And I'd by that point, I'd kind of smashed through a few boundaries and upset a few people, and I thought, well, I've done that now, so I might as well carry on and make the most of it. And so added in, so we ripped up our lives and moved over to Shropshire and lived in a caravan for nearly 2 years in order to kind of help get Plant and Farm up and running and
very much a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
All right, well, really good speaking to you. Thank you for watching the interview. Now, if you're interested in finding out more about Clare Hill's work, the Roots Regeneration Program, and Plant and Farm, then please check the links below. Thanks for watching.